Good evening and welcome to the Alumni Board Association meeting here on August 11th, 2014. This evening we have a very special guest who actually just today was nominated the president of the University of Pikeville Alumni Association, Mr. Tommy Chamberlin, who I understand graduated in '96, that's right, was a member of the baseball team, a right-handed flamethrower, I understand, and also now works in the prosecutor's office here in town, in Pikeville. And I'm going to let Tommy tell you about tonight's presentation. I had the privilege of seeing this at Rotary a month or so ago, and I think you'll find this very interesting. Please welcome Tommy Chamberlin.
All right. Well, good evening. What we're going to talk about tonight is a journey to the Holy Land. And we're going to talk about the tour I helped lead to Israel and Jordan in the month of May of this year, and hopefully you enjoy it. And one thing I always tell our groups, when I do lessons like this, I speak to groups that I'm used to getting feedback. So when you have a question, you just pop your hand up and say, hey Tommy, something, get my attention, and we'll stop right then and there and talk about what you want to talk about if that's what we're seeing. Now, we're crossing our fingers and hoping things go well tonight, but we have had massive technical difficulties tonight. So the pictures are going to be good. We're not so sure about our videos, and I can tell you the audio is not going to work. But I am going to play you one audio clip off of my laptop that I want you to hear and listen to that I think you'll enjoy. So we'll get started, and hopefully everything will work good. Do we need to turn these lights off, or can everybody see the screen good? Okay. Well, what we did, our tour was in May of this year. We actually had 23 people from here in eastern Kentucky. So this was a group put together from Pike County, Floyd County, Johnson County, Martin County, the surrounding areas. And the majority was actually from right here in Pikeville. And I'd like to introduce you to a picture of our group, just a few people from our group here that you might see in some of the pictures. Now, I'd like to point out Mom there in the left corner, because this whole trip happened because my mother said, I went to Israel in 1983 and I want to go back. And I said, Mom, I'll take you if you want to go. And she showed up one day and said, I'm ready to go. When are we planning the trip? And the judge I worked for in the back corner, Judge Kelsey Friend, told me, when you take your mother, you're not just taking your mother, you're taking me too. That turned into 23 people total. So I got to take, from taking Mom, I got 21 more people, and we did a tour to the Holy Land. You see a couple people here up there, Pastor Dave and Kay. You all know Kay Hammonds from the board here. Pastor Dave and Kay was on our trip, and of course there's me right in the middle. But my goal tonight is to take you along with us on our trip to the Holy Land. Just give you a little bit of an idea and to kind of give you a visual of what it's like to walk there, the things you'll see, the things you'll do. So what I want to do is just jump right in, and we're going to start in the south of Israel. If you know much about Israel, it's a very small country. Think of one of our smaller states. I think it's larger than Rhode Island, but it's that kind of size. A lot of people think the country is large size, but Israel is very, very small. You can drive from one end to the other in one day. But we're going to stop at the Dead Sea. That's where we're going to start. And you see a couple pictures here from the Dead Sea. I like to show the judge, because the judge, some of us here know Judge Kelsey Friend, and the judge has quite a bit of problem with his feet. He's diabetic. He said, I'm going to go get in the water. They said, that's good stuff. Judge will tell you that since he's been in the Dead Sea today, his feet are much better. He doesn't even wear the brace on his foot. You can ask him about that, okay? So, but anybody know why the Dead Sea is famous? It is the lowest point on earth, 1,401 feet below sea level. When you go out in the Dead Sea, you just float. You're not going to sink. I went out and did both arms and legs up in the air, and it was like I was floating on air. Could not sink. So it's an amazing thing. It's, I think, 33 times more salt and minerals than the ocean. So the Dead Sea, if you trust me, if you have a paper cut or anything, you're going to die. So, but anyways, that's what the Dead Sea is. But we're going to talk. We went from there to a place called Masada. Now, if you've heard of Masada before, it's an ancient fortress. Palace. It was built by a man named Herod the Great. Most of us know about Herod the Great from the New Testament, okay? Now, in Masada, there was one way up and one way down in ancient times called the snake path. And we're going to cross our fingers and hope the video works, and we're going to try to show you what the Judean desert looks like and get a view of that snake path up to the side. So let's see if it'll work. And I tell you what I'm going to have to do is get it quick over here. We're riding the cable car up. We decided the hour walk was a little too much for most of us. Up the mountain side, we're on a roof here. There's the jet, there's the sunlight. And what I want you to see is you get the view here of what the desert looks like in southern India. And if you look here from the center to the right, you can see a little path up the side. And we'll see the hikers down here, and that is the snake path. That is way up to the side. And we decided to skip the walk, and we rode the cable car, and this is the view you get up top to the Dead Sea. Okay? You can see how barren the land is, what a hot, dry area is. The neat thing, the day we were there, it was 105 degrees. I didn't break a sweat for 40 minutes. No humidity. I don't know if it's possible to have zero humidity, but compared to eastern Kentucky, it was nothing. It took me 40 minutes to break a sweat walking around in 105 degrees. But I do want to introduce you to our tour guide here. This is Maher Nahas, and this is him talking on the side. He was a Israeli-Palestinian Christian. I forget what else, or something. But we often think, when we think of that part of the world, we think of Palestinians, we think of Israelis. There's a lot more to that, and there's a lot more of a mixture. He's an Israeli citizen who is a Palestinian, who is a Christian, and his family goes back to the early centuries of Christianity. But here's a step down view, and the reason I like to show this is show a quote from Josephus. Does anybody know what happened in Masada? Anybody know the story of Masada? It's not a biblical story. It happened after the time of Christ, but it was a very famous story in history. And after Jerusalem was destroyed, this was the last holdout of the Jewish Revolution. And basically, there were 900 Jewish people up here, and the Roman army surrounded Masada. But do you see that one little path, one way up and one way down, easy to defend? You didn't need an army to defend against an army. Well, Rome being Rome, Rome built a ramp to the top of the mountain. And the night came when it was clear to both people on each side the next day they would break through and the Roman army would be in Masada. And Josephus tells us the next one that made through, this is what he said. He was an ancient historian. He said, the Romans made an assault upon the fortress, but saw nobody as an enemy, but a terrible solitude on every side, with the fire within the place as well as a perfect silence. If you don't know the story of Masada, it's a famous story in history because instead of being dragged around as slaves, the Jewish defenders decided to commit suicide. And every man killed his own wife and children. And then the men drew lots, and 10 men killed all the other men, and then one man had killed the other and then killed himself. Because you couldn't commit, when I say commit suicide, you couldn't do your own to someone else. So that's what happened. And it's very famous today. If you're in the Israeli army, you go take an oath or swear in at Masada. So it's a neat place. But we're going to skip from there and get into a little faster. From Masada, we move to a place called En-Gedi, means the spring of the wild goats. And when you think about the desert, if you look here, you'll see that you see a little green. And En-Gedi is famous. This is where David in the Bible hid from King Saul. And Saul goes in the cave, and David cuts part of his cloak off. That happened in the caves here at En-Gedi. And if you know how uninhabitable the desert is, you understand how a man can survive here at En-Gedi because of the springs of the water. And that's why you see a little bit of green. And from En-Gedi, we move to another place called Qumran. You may know what happened at Qumran. It's famous for an archaeological discovery in the 1940s called the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, if I tell you about the Dead Sea Scrolls, you probably know what that is, don't you? Those are biblical and other documents that date back to the 1st century. They're important in our modern history because we know that the Old Testament records we have, even the oldest copies weren't near that old. We know that what we read today is actually accurate to what was written back then because of the so. But with that said, we move on to some other spots in the desert. This is the Mountain of Temptation. I like to show this because up on the side, you see this monastery. This is where they believe Jesus was tempted by Satan. The monks built this monastery on the side of the cliff. So if you want to be a monk in the Mount of Temptation, you can't have a fear of heights. Because this is up on the mountainside, and this is where you're going to stay and sleep. All right? And I always throw a camel in, because, we don't have one here, but if you have a child, and you're doing a presentation in the Middle East, you've got to have a camel. Okay? So here's our camel. It's obligatory for a Middle East presentation. And we're going to stop here and change our whole perspective on Israel. We're going to go from the far south to the far north to a place called Caesarea Philippi. Now, if you're famous with the biblical story, this is where Jesus said to his disciples, "Who do men say that I am?" Okay? Now, what's the first thing you notice different about the far north? It's green. Yeah, it's green. It's very green. And at Caesarea Philippi, the main, you see the big rock face in the back? This was where the center part of the city was at the time. And it's interesting, we know that Jesus told stories in parables, but I think he also used visual images. Because what did I tell you happened here? This is where Jesus says to the disciples, "Who do men say that I am?" Peter in the end, his name is Simon. Jesus changes his name to Peter. Petra meaning the rock. Now, Caesarea Philippi was a pagan city. Why would he bring him here? This cliff face is very unique in Israel. It's very solid. It's a symbol of strength. When Jesus is saying, "You are the rock," they're looking at the rock. The famous rock there. So it adds a little bit to that story. Here's our group, actually in one of the pagan outposts there. And from there, we're going to move to a place called Dan. If you remember the original 12 tribes of Israel, Dan was one of those. And Dan, this area is, when you think of the term in the Old Testament, the land of milk and honey, I think this is what you see when you see the rivers and the greenery in Dan. But my favorite spot was this city. This is the ancient Israelite city of Dan that goes back to 700-800 BC, maybe a little older. And this is the city gates. You notice kind of the ramp up to the top? That's where the gate would be back there. So you don't put your gate right out front. You put it where you're going to make it hard to get up there. And it would have been a lot higher than what it is today, because this is basically the foundations of the mountain. Okay? And one of the interesting biblical verses that we read about was 2 Samuel 19. It says, "So the king got up and sat at the gate, then they all came to the king's presence." So when you look at that entryway back in the back, that's where the king would sit and hold it. Okay? And here's our group taking a picture in that gate. Now, of course, you got to imagine a little taller, the big wooden doors across it, but that's what the gate would look like when you come into the city. Okay? And after our morning there, we head to a place called Galilee. Most of you are familiar with the region called Galilee. And the first thing I'm going to do is show you a mountaintop view. And this is the region where Jesus spent the majority of his ministry. Okay? This is one of my favorite pictures from the trip. That's King Peter in the back. And you can see the lake and see Galilee. And then here's a picture of me. And the neat thing from the mountains surrounding it is you can see that whole lake. Okay? A beautiful view of the lake. It's just a beautiful area. But we would go from the top of the mountains down to the lake. And we board boats and we go in the area near where they believe Jesus walked on water. And we'll see if our videos will work. So we'll try this video and give you an idea of what it looks like. Let's see if I can get it clicked. You can see the beautiful blue water. This was actually one of my favorite spots in Israel, the city out. It was just a beautiful place, and I really enjoyed it.
Oh Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder
We spent the night in a place called Tiberias. You've heard of that Roman emperor, named for him. And we stopped the next morning at a place called the Church of Beatitudes. It's on the mountain where they believe Jesus gave his sermon on the mount. And it's a beautiful church. And kind of the reason I wanted to show you this is I wanted you to listen to an audio clip. So what I'm going to have to do is play you this audio clip off of my laptop. So I'm hoping you can hear it. And I'm going to try to get these simultaneously. But Our tour guide goes into this church with the signs that were said silence. You know, we call it the nuns' hushes. He walks in and begins to sing in Arabic. And you can imagine the acoustics in a place like this. And I'm hoping you can hear it. And I'll try to get it. But what he told me is it's actually a Catholic praise song. It was beautiful. And one of the things that's hard to bring back and show people is like the acoustics and what the environment, how things feel, being in a place like that, with something like that. It is really amazing. But one of our next stops was a place called Capernaum. I like to include that. The signs of the entrance say the town of Jesus. Now, if you'd have said, Tommy, what's the town of Jesus? I'd have said, well, Bethlehem, Nazareth, maybe Jerusalem. But why? Does anybody have a clue why this place claims to be the town of Jesus? Anybody got a clue? I didn't know this before I went. I didn't know some research. Okay. Well, so why Capernaum? Okay. This is a Jewish synagogue in Capernaum that dates to 4 centuries after Jesus and is built on the foundation of the one from Jesus' time. In the New Testament, we know that Jesus had about 3 years of his ministry, and 18 to about 24 months of that time, his base was out of Capernaum. He left Nazareth. Okay, he left it, and so this is where his base was. And my favorite spot in Capernaum was here. I like archaeology, I love history. And you can see here, these are foundational ruins from the time of Jesus. Okay? And we see this spaceship-looking building built over top of something in the distance. Now, I'll tell you what, you go in and you see down in the glass, and you see this little room down there. Okay? Now, why do you think they built, because this is a Catholic church, why was it built over a particular spot there? You may have a guess? Okay, I'll give you a little information. In that one room, an archaeologist dug and studied here, they found one room that was covered in plaster. And the plaster had graffiti all over it. The graffiti dated back to around AD 50. 15 years, 20 years within the life of Christ. Now, they don't find graffiti like that in other areas and plaster in other rooms in the area. That graffiti all declares Jesus is Lord, Jesus is the risen Messiah, all these things. Why would they decorate one little room like that in this space? And it goes all the way back to people that would have been alive when he was alive. Why would they do that? You don't have to be an archaeologist to figure this out. What tells you, why would you think one place would be picked like that? You got a guess? Oh, y'all don't talk to me like most of my groups. So,
did he stay there?
that's exactly right. They believe that it is most likely a place where he stayed. I told you, 18 to 24 months in Capernaum, you got to have a place to stay. They think he likely stayed with Peter, in Peter's house, or Peter's mother-in-law, and there would have been memory. They would have known where he stayed. They believe that that was his room, and where he stayed. And at that time, the early Christians would have came back, and that's why they venerated the spot. And so when we talk about archaeology and things we can know about some ancient history, you'll know the ballpark in Jerusalem where things happen. You'll know you're close. This is one place that you can go to and stand that you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, as much as we can ever know anything about someone alive 2,000 years ago, we know Jesus never stood. We know he was there. So that's one of my favorite places. But anyway, with that said, one of the things when you're at a tour like this, you get hungry. If you're an Eastern Kentucky fella, you don't miss lunch. Okay? So we're going to go have a delicacy called St. Peter's fish. And I hope you would enjoy this. This is Mom with her St. Peter's fish. If you can see that real good, you can see the head, the tail, the fins, the eyeballs staring at you. And who would enjoy eating fish like that? Not me. I was chicken, and I ordered the chicken. So I will eat it. Mom said, why don't you try this? I don't like seafood. Best fish I've ever had in my mouth in my life. It was amazing. It didn't have a fishy taste. It was great. I love it. Wish I would. And so it was excellent. But after that, we took a time to look at the Jordan River. In modern Israel, the place where they believe John baptized Jesus is an area you can't really have baptismal services. So Israel set aside a special place in the Jordan River for that. This is Barbara Friend, Judge Kelsey Friend's wife, getting baptized in the Jordan River. I thought you'd enjoy a picture of that, just a beautiful spot. And most Christians that go there want to have this service done for them. And probably wouldn't be okay? And from there we go to a place called Nazareth. You've heard that story. And it's grown from a small little village to a big town today. And I just want to show you a couple of quick pictures. This is the modern Church of the Annunciation. And I like it because it's built over this Crusader-era church. And you can see back in that cave, I believe this is where Mary was approached by the angel and said, you're going to give birth to the Messiah. Okay? And from there, we leave that behind, and we go to Caesarea Maritima on the Mediterranean coast. Because obviously you have ladies with you, you cannot have a proper vacation if you don't go to the beach. So we went where Herod the Great built a port city, and this is a theater in Caesarea Maritima. This is where Paul probably stood before Agrippa in the New Testament. And here's a photo of the beach and the view there. Okay? And of course, there's me with an aqueduct. Because a good Roman city has to have a Roman aqueduct to bring fresh water in for your people. All right. And from there, we stop by this valley as we go back inland. And it's called the Valley of Elah. And I went to this dried up creek bed, as we call it, or a brook would be their term, and I picked up a smooth stone. Anybody got a guess where I wanted a smooth stone in the Valley of Elah? Okay. It was somewhere near this place that a young teenager had a big ugly fella named Goliath. So I wanted to pick up a smooth stone from that place. But from there, we leave that place behind, we climb up to the hill country, the atmosphere would begin to change, and we would come to Jerusalem. Okay. And in Jerusalem, the first thing we would do the next morning is I make sure we were volunteering on archaeology dig. And our group spent a couple hours help sifting through archaeological remains removed from the Temple Mount. The Palestinian Authority did some illegal work there about 15 years ago, and the Israeli Antiquities Authority sifted that out. I got a picture here of the judge, because as much as this was an event we put on the schedule for my benefit, the judge was the one that found the best thing, and he's not letting me live it now. So that's how we started, and from there we went to Bethlehem. And here's the neat thing, something I enjoyed. Our first stop was not a site in Bethlehem, but a gift shop. And it was to meet with a family with a very special history. This gentleman here is the grandson of the antiquities dealer that was involved in the transaction for the Dead Sea Scrolls. The jar there was what the first scrolls were found in, the Isaiah scroll, and I forget what else. And Israel is the only country in the world where it is legal to sell antiquities. You have a license, you can sell antiquities. So I spent almost my entire spending budget there and brought something home. Then I had to email my wife and get special permission to buy more stuff before I came. Because we'd already had a budget plan for me, and I went pretty much blew it right there. But anyways, we leave the shop behind, and we go to the shepherd's field. We all know the Christmas story, and the angels announcing the birth of Jesus to the shepherds. And you'll notice I have a picture in a cave. Anybody got an idea why that is? The shepherds, it's the fields outside of Bethlehem. Okay? If you're a shepherd, okay, and you're responsible for all these sheep, night's coming, you going to sleep outside? Protect these sheep? You take them back in the cave, and you sleep at the mouth of the cave. But here's the neat thing, when we think of a field, we don't think of fields and caves. The fields outside of Bethlehem are full of these caves. So when we think of the Christmas story, the shepherd was most likely laying at the mouth of one of these caves, and the angel comes in and speaks to him at the mouth of the cave. So That's what you see when you go to Chamberlin. From there, we travel on into Bethlehem and see the Church of the Nativity. This is the oldest church in the world, dating from about 525 AD. The Persians destroyed all the churches in the Holy Land in the 600s. And the reason was, they were Muslim, that's what we're going to do. Why did they leave this one? Well, they come in, when you talk about the Christmas story, who do you think of? The shepherds and the who? Who do you think of? Wise men. Now, where were the wise men from? The east. What's east of Israel? Persia. There was artwork of the Persian wise men. So they said, we don't know what this is about, but we like it. We're not messing this church up. And that's why this church is still in the world today. They destroyed all the others and left that one. But we leave that behind and head to the old city of Jerusalem. And we spent our morning at the Wailing Wall or the Western Wall. And I like to talk about this sign because when you go into the Wailing Wall, you read this from the rabbi of the Western Wall. It says, "Dear visitors, you are approaching the holy side of the Western Wall where the divine presence always rests." Okay? The Western Wall is the most holy place in the Jewish religion today. The reason is, it is part of the retaining wall of Herod the Great's temple, the last Jewish temple standing. And for a period of history, this is the only station you can still see. Now, what's neat, if you look here, there's a partition, ladies on one side, men on the other. What we thought was interesting is it wasn't 50-50. The men had about 2/3 of the space, and the ladies had about 1/3. It's a little different in Middle Eastern culture, okay? And here's a picture of Mom. And if you look close, you see the cracked white stuff. The tradition is when you go to the Western Wall, you write your prayer on a piece of paper, and you leave it in a crack. And the reason you do that, back to the sign I just read you, they believe the holy presence of God still rests there. And this is the closest you can leave your prayer to God. And that's the tradition. So, okay. Now, we're going to leave that temple area behind and go to an overlook of the Mount of Olives. I want to show you this. This is the view of the city. Most of you know that dome with the rock. And that is a Muslim shrine. It's actually not a mosque. And so this is what you see from the Mount of Olives. And you go right down the hill, and this is what I learned most, understanding the biblical stories of the New Testament. What the trick did for me most was understand where these places were. So you walk down from the top of the Mount of Olives, and right down at the base of the hill is a place called Gethsemane. And Gethsemane is a beautiful garden. And we know this is the place in the New Testament where Jesus had his passion, his agony before he was arrested the night before his crucifixion. Okay? And there's a church there called the Church of Agony, or the Church of All Nations. It's built over that place today. We would also go to where they believe the Last Supper occurred on the day of Pentecost. The space is done in medieval times, and this is Crusader era, so you can see what that looks like. And the next morning we would go do something with some uncertainty. We were going to go on the Temple Mount. Now, if you know anything about that region, you don't just get to go. Okay? There's a long line. It's usually 2 hours, and if you walk up to the front, they just don't like the way you look, or they want to close for the day, they can turn you away. It don't matter how long you've been in line. So we gamble and we late instead of early. And we get there, and we get in. So we get up there, and there's crowds everywhere, and our tour guide does a little talk, and then the next thing we knew, we had timed it so perfect that we got the place almost entirely to ourselves for now. Which was a wonderful experience, and most of you probably know this is where the Jewish temple once stood. Most likely, the place where the Holy of Holies of the temple was is where the Dome of the Rock is now. Okay? And here's our group sitting below the Dome of the Rock. And I like to include this picture. These are a group of Muslim girls. And what was happening here, as you see, I get this picture. Well, obviously, I'm in my hiking Western American clothes with my Indiana Jones like hat on, and I'm trying to be sneaky and get a picture of these girls with the Dome of the Rock in the background in their Eastern attire, and trying not to offend them by making it obvious. Well, I realized as they're moving around the other way, they've got their cameras trying to get a picture of that funny-looking Western fella in his high, So we were quite entertained by each other, looking very different to each other. And we both realized at about the same time what was going on, and they chuckled and I chuckled and kind of smiled a little bit. So, but We would leave the Temple Mount behind and we walk up Via Dolorosa, very tight, twisted path through the old city streets of Jerusalem. Interesting thing I will tell you today is it's shops. It's a tourist trap. Okay, it's shops all the way. But I'll show you where it is. It's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This is the view from the outside, and this is the view of the spot on the inside. This is where the Catholic faith believes that the crucifixion and resurrection happened. They actually believe it happened in where the shrine is. And back in its day, in the 3rd century, what you did, they cut it away. The space was more important, so they didn't preserve the tomb. They cut this away. It's the oldest tradition. Okay? The next day, we have the true Indiana Jones adventure, and we go below the streets into the western wall area, beneath the streets of modern Jerusalem. And we come to a space where it says, this is the closest you can be to where the Holy of Holies was. And that's what that is. I show mom here because we have this very enclosed Indiana Jones on space, and if you know Judge Freddie 6'6", I did hear something from behind me at one point, about 20 days jail contempt when he got me home, but he forgave me by the end of the trip. So, look on this cliff face, part is now covered of this parking lot, but you can see the eyes and nose of what appears to be a skull. They think this may be Golgotha, but here's a view of what the Garden Tomb looks like. And what I'm going to do is in the video, we'll work for us again. We've been looking so far. We're going to step, oh, there we go, it worked this time. We'll see if it works good on the way to see what it looks like inside.
Right here in front and then back in the ship. We're going to that chapel, so we're going to have a big roof line for the chapel.
I also went to Jordan, but I'm going to fly through that because we're running behind. We saw Petra, and we saw the Roman ruins of Jericho. Okay? And so that's basically our trip in a real small nutshell. Okay? If you'd like to hear the full presentation, I do those for church and other groups. This is really going fast and we're trying to cover it quick. But here's the big thing. Okay? Why we wanted to do this presentation tonight. This trip was the beginning of hopeful travel experiences for people from Eastern Kentucky in the coming years. And the University of UPIKE, specifically our Alumni Association, is asked to partner with these groups and offer tours in the coming years. And we're going to do that in 2015. Now, we have not made the final decision yet, but it'll be made in the next week or two. And either at the end of next summer or next fall, we're going to travel to 1 or 2 locations. And the first option is Greece. We're considering doing the footsteps of Paul and the Apostles. And if we do that, we'll go to Greece, where we're doing an extension to either the Grecian islands or to Rome, where you'll see the Roman ruins and Colosseum. And our other option is a little different type of trip. We are looking at an option to England and Scotland to do medieval history and the Reformation Church history. I like to call the trip there castles, cathedrals, and other curiosities. It's a wonderful trip. That's Stirling Castle. This is the inside of Westminster Abbey. And those be a wonderful trip. But here's the one thing I want to say about those tours. I know that UPIKE has tried to be involved in some tours in recent years, and to be very frank, the pricing was higher than something we went looking at a tour. Those tours were not very successful. Here's the difference with this tour. This tour will be priced at the same rate as you can go book with another large tour company. It's the same price. The difference is you get to travel with people from Eastern Kentucky and the University of UPIKE. That'll be the difference. As I told you on the trip we just took, we had 23 people from home, from Eastern Kentucky, and it was a wonderful experience. I traveled to Egypt and Jordan before, and we with 22 other strangers. Loved the trip, but it's hard to compare when you can travel with people from your home area, and when you'll get on that plane, you've already talked to them, you know them, you've been to meetings, and share a wonderful experience for a lifetime together. So that's the end of the presentation. If you're interested in our trip in the future, we'd love to talk to you. If you see this on TV, please contact us. and we'd love to tell you more about the trip. We will have a final decision in the next week or two, whether it be Greece or England or Scotland, and we'll have detailed itinerary pricing and all of that.